Thank you so much. Very good evening from India, and good morning and good afternoon to all our distinguished panelists who joined us for this very important panel on university, industry, government, community partnership, the multi-stakeholder collaborations for sustainable development as part of our three-day hybrid World University Summit, which is being organized by the OP Jindal Global University. This is indeed the fourth edition of the summit, and we are glad that we are joined by uh, some senior university leaders and administrators as part of this panel, which is going to discuss on the prospects and problems and opportunities pertaining to multi-stakeholder collaborations for sustainable development. We have with us for this particular panel Ms. Beth Button, who is the Director, External Affairs, the Association of Commonwealth Universities, United Kingdom. We are also joined by Professor Dr. Edward PECK, who is Vice Chancellor and President of the Nottingham Trent University, United Kingdom. We are also joined by Professor Eduardo PEñALVER, who is the president of the Seattle University, United States of America. And we also have with us Professor Julián Rodriguez, who is rector of the Austral University in Argentina, Buenos Aires. And my name is SRIDHAR PATNAIK, and I'm a professor and registrar of the OP Jindal Global University, and I will be moderating this particular session on multi-stakeholder partnerships. Well, it is obvious to all of us about the importance of such partnerships, particularly when we are talking about universities, because universities, as part of a very important social ecosystem, they form the vital components of local and regional environments, and they stand at the intersection of knowledge creation, dissemination, and application. Therefore, collaborating with industry, government, and community organizations, universities are uniquely positioned in order to sort of facilitate and catalyze positive change in a complex world where economies and societies have internationalized. And as we are all aware, people are also increasingly linked across borders through various phenomena, including markets and formal and other semi-formal networks, and politics and capital and other media networks as well. So, considering the interconnectedness and the interdependence, all these social challenges, they call for a kind of a collaborative action. And in this very particular context, the Sustainable Development Goals, they have formed a kind of a universal call to collaborative action in order to address some of the social and economic challenges, protect the planet, and to ensure that people enjoy peace and prosperity as enshrined in the Charter of the United Nations. The 17 Sustainable Development Goals build on the successes of the Millennium Development Goals while including new areas such as climate change, economic inequality, innovation, sustainable consumption, peace and justice, amongst other challenges, which are priorities for the society at large to address these challenges. Therefore, when we talk of these challenges, we are setting ourselves on an ambitious and an interconnected global development agenda that needs that needs or envisions a new global partnership. And that's the context in which you know the multi-stakeholder partnerships between businesses, non-governmental organizations, the civil society at large, and higher educational institutions and other intergovernmental organizations and actors, they become so crucial in achieving or in sort of trying to harness these goals. But however, while these are all opportunities, we also do have challenges when we talk about multi-stakeholder partnerships because they are unique in both character as well as substance, because a collaboration between stakeholders who are besieged with a common problem, but they do have different interests or perspectives or even access to resources and even the method or approach to understand a problem. Therefore, this particular session is going to give us an opportunity to delve into the critical role that multi-stakeholder partnerships can play in advancing social progress and enabling the transfer of knowledge and even informing policy making and addressing community needs. And as we talk about universities and the role of universities, needless to say, they're so very symbiotically connected to the society around us. And this particular panel is now going to address some of the challenges and the way in which this particular relationship can take place between university and the other actors as part of the larger society. So we have in this panel global university leaders and administrators who will discuss some of the strategies for overcoming the challenges, including other challenges like funding constraints and differing priorities to maximize the impact of university, industry, government, community collaborations. And our panelists, they also bring with them a wealth of experience in terms of leading universities in the UK, in the USA, and Argentina, and even representing an inter-university consortium body like the Association of Commonwealth Universities. So we are hoping that they're going to offer us with diverse geographical and institutional contexts, while even offering us with invaluable insights into the challenges and opportunities for these collaborative partnerships. So throughout our session, we will explore questions around these collaboration challenges, and we will also try to understand how universities can leverage the resources and expertise to address some of the complex societal challenges, and what strategies can be employed to foster inclusive, equitable partnerships that prioritize sustainability and social justice. So before we embark any further, uh, with these introductory remarks as a point of departure, I would like to raise a question to all the panelists in terms of understanding why should industry and academia collaborate, and in your experience, what benefits have you seen coming out of such collaborations in the context of sustainable development goals. So we will go to each of the panelists present here, starting with BETH Button, and then we will go to Professor Edward PECK and Professor EDUARDO and Professor Rodriguez, and then we will continue with the conversation. So over to you, BETH.
Thank you very much, and thank you again for convening such an important panel. At the Association of Commonwealth Universities, the role of international collaboration in higher education is a really core part of our mission, and we really see the bringing together of industry stakeholders, governments, and our member universities really key to the realisation of the Sustainable Development Goals. And we do that really in a number of ways through the networks that we convene and the advocacy that we do on behalf of our members with governments, but also we design programmes that really look at embedding the kind of connections between industry and knowledge exchange in the Sustainable Development Goals. But I think to your question, the why they should collaborate and the benefits that we've seen, particularly for the Sustainable Development Goals, we wanted to understand as the ACU in what ways university partnerships really contributed to the Sustainable Development Goals. So we undertook some research a few years ago that found that university partnerships are one of the kind of most important and effective ways of really translating impact on the Sustainable Development Goals, and actually that those partnerships can be more effective and cost efficient for donors and a more impactful form of partnership than single university or kind of single partnership outputs. So I think really and I think what we were trying to really understand by this was how, university partnerships, whether that's with industry, with governments, or with others, are often kind of put as central to the SDGs, but what is it about those that really are effective and impactful? And I think we've been able to sort of find evidence in this that universities and businesses can find within partnerships with universities. The multi-stakeholder partnerships that we have are one of the most effective ways, partly because universities are really well connected, and the Sustainable Development Goals require that interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary approaches. So having universities that act as a real kind of focal point to that delivers real value add to governments and others. And they are more effective, partly because they enable the mobilization of resources and complement each other's experience and expertise. But they also reduce that sort of financial and project management risk and increase the prospect of future funding. So I think there can be real benefits, not just in the kind of teaching and learning, in the research, commercialization, and that, but actually in looking at higher education partnerships as being a kind of really effective mechanism for garnering wider, longer term sustainable impact through those projects as well.
Thank you so much, Beth. Over to you, Professor Edward PECK, and then we go around the virtual table, if I may say so.
Of course.
Yeah.
Thank you. So I thought I'd tell you a short story to illustrate why I think business collaborates universities around these stakeholder partnerships. From our point of view at Nottingham Trent University, we were founded in 1843 as the Nottingham Government School of Design. And it was, as the name suggests, set up by government because they were concerned about the level of skills and innovation in the textiles industry. So we've been at this for over 175 years. And while we have now a very global university with staff and students from 160 countries, at our heart, I think, we still look to these partnerships as fundamental to what we do. And I think we've learned 4 things over the last few years about how you make these partnerships successful. And I think the first thing is we have to understand and be guided by the needs and priorities of our partners. The second is we have to go to them. We have to go to where they are in terms of locality to make it really accessible for them. We have to deliver for them. So if we're going to do something, we have to have the ability to deliver it. At the same time, we have to deliver for ourselves. There has to be something in this for the university, which makes it worth our while and our time. And fourthly, and crucially for me, we have to mobilize the commitment and enthusiasm of our university colleagues. Because without that, none of these partnerships are going to work. They have to believe there is something about this partnership that speaks to what they think is their personal motivation and the social mission of the organisation. So my example is a quick one. It's based in a town called Mansfield, an old coal mining town in Nottinghamshire, about 20 kilometres from our campus up the road. Very high levels of deprivation, very low levels of skills acquisition. So about 5 years ago, we were thinking about this. We realised that in this town, it had the lowest level of sociability of virtually any town in the United Kingdom. And we're a university that's driven by helping people transform their lives through education. Now, we didn't think that sorting out Mansfield was our responsibility, but it was a challenge to us. Why was it in our own backyard? The town of 250,000 people had such low levels of educational attainment. So we went and held a stakeholder conference convened by the local authority, by the district council, and said, what would it look like to transform Mansfield? And what would be the contribution our university could make? And that was civic agencies, it was businesses, it was NGOs and ourselves. And they said quite clearly, you could turn Mansfield into a university town. That would be just one single thing that would transform the prospects of young people and older people in our town. And why they said that was they wanted accessible courses, not just physically, but psychologically accessible courses for local people who have no experience of university, to let them get the higher level skills that local employers needed and was crying out for and saying, we can't get people to work in our companies in the town, to enable them to get those jobs and then put their salaries back into the local economy and then to act as role models for their children and their neighbours about a different way of thinking about their future as higher educated people in their town. So to do this, we started off by creating a campus on a further education college site. Very unusual for a university to move into a building on a FE college site, but we did it because it was the right thing to do. It was the right place to be. It was right in the middle of town, and people knew that was a safe environment to go and study. And today we have 600 students, mostly local, mostly mature, people from the town, studying engineering, construction, computing, nursing, and these courses map directly onto the skills needs of local employers, which they've told us very explicitly. If you give people these skills, we will employ them. And that is what's starting to happen. So that connection is built in the fundamental design. And along the way, because we've aligned our priorities with those of the local authority, the business, the college, we've generated something like £75 million of additional investment in facilities for innovation skills in the town, because we have the capacity to write bids. We know what government wants when they read a bid, whereas local agencies didn't. And we've also, of course, invested our own money in Mansfield, of which more in a second. But what this tells us, in the 2020s, we're doing a gain in Mansfield, generating investment and transformation in the way our founders achieved this in Nottingham in the 1840s. Now, we've delivered for our partners, but also we've delivered for ourselves. It's been reputationally very, very advantageous to us when this work is talked about considerably in government and in opposition. We have new facilities, and crucially, there's an income stream. So we invested an amount of money, around about £5 million, as it happens. And over the next 10 years, we'll see a return. We'll get our money back and we'll get a surplus as time goes by. But crucially, it played to what our colleagues thought the university was for. They think the university is about transforming people's lives of education, and this is doing that in a place where the opportunity wasn't there before. We got massive sign-up, massive ownership, and massive commitment to making this happen. So I hope that practical example gives you a flavour of how we've gone about it and what these multi-stakeholder partnerships can do, in this case, for a deprived community.
Thank you so much for those interesting insights, Professor Edward Peck. Now I will request Professor PEñALVER to share his thoughts and reflections.
Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me to participate, and it's the morning here, so good morning to everyone, and good evening to those in India. Sustainability is really a core value for Seattle University. We are a Jesuit university, founded in 1891, obviously located here in Seattle in the Pacific Northwest, and so sustainability and building a sustainable future is, we see it as a core moral commitment of the university, and something that we're known for, both in terms of the educational programs that we offer, but also the way that we operate our campus. If we're going to make progress on the Sustainable Development Goals, if we're going to build a more sustainable future, there are really, I think, two things that are going to be essential to that. One, I mean, there are many things, but at least two things that are relevant to this discussion. I think one is technological innovation. We're going to need new technologies that can help us live more sustainably, and we're going to need educated citizens who understand the challenges and the imperative of building a sustainable future. And I think universities have essential roles to play in both of those projects. And in thinking about how to achieve those goals, collaboration with industry, I think, is an important strategy for universities to deploy, and there are a number of reasons for that. One, and we see this all around us here in Seattle, right? We've got within 20 miles the headquarters of Microsoft and Amazon, companies that are on the cutting edge of AI development. We have around us outposts of Google and Facebook. That this is an interesting time, in that the most innovative technology right now does not exist on university campuses, and I don't think that's been true in our lifetimes, really, until the last few years. If you think about the major innovations of the 20th century, they really began on university campuses and with university research, obviously backed by the government, but but not in the private sector for the most part. And now the private sector has access to technology that is just doesn't exist on universities. And so if you want to understand that technology, if you want your students to have access to that technology, there need to be partnerships with industry to make that possible. Beyond that, there's just a great deal of expertise and experience rooted in industry that we want our students to be able to access, and we can only gain that by partnering with industry. And then finally, we need to be aligned. It's important that the way we're preparing our students be aligned with the challenges that industry is facing, whether it be about sustainability or otherwise. And if we get too far out of alignment, then the skills that we're giving to our students will be wasted. So it's access to that technology, access to expertise and experience rooted in practice, and the need to maintain alignment all counsel in favor of strong relationships with industry in pursuit of these two ways of addressing the challenge of sustainability. Universities excel at innovative research, and I think as Jesuit universities, we're very focused on translational research and research that will have impact. And so partnering with industry to generate relevant research is an important strategy, and the ability of our students to participate in that research as undergraduates or graduate students really sets the stage for the development of the kinds of technologies that we'll need to become more sustainable. And then the students who are not directly engaged in research, but who are learning about the challenges of sustainable development and are able to do that in ways that are connected to practical problems that are brought to us by industry, are going to be more informed citizens, and I think throughout their lives and their careers able to guide the organizations that they become part of, the communities that they participate in towards a more sustainable future. So I think that it's not the only strategy, but partnering with industry is a very important strategy for universities to be pursuing, and a way to connect ourselves to our local communities in support of the Sustainable Development Goals.
Thank you so much for those thoughtful reflections, Professor Peñalver. We'll get back to some of the pointers that you had touched upon, particularly connecting innovation with funding and so on and so forth. But before that, I would like to bring in Professor Rodriguez from Austral University to share his experiences about the benefits that they have seen coming out of collaborations in the context of Sustainable Development Goals. Over to you, Professor Rodriguez.
Yeah, thank you. Good morning for Eduardo, or good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are. First, I want to congratulate Jindal Global University for the summit and the subjects that are being discussed or will be next discussed. I consider this conversation, these discussions are key for understanding deeply the university role in the 21st century, that clearly has a shift according new context, new technologies, new society demands, new actors in the development of knowledge, etc. And second, I want to thank the invitation for being part of this panel. Thank you, Professor PATNAIK. And of course, thanks to the other panelists. I'm very grateful sharing with you this panel and this time. I would like to begin with a different approach of this topic that for me is a border condition of interaction of universities with industry or society in general. I consider the base, the solid ground over we could build construct the building of healthy relationship between us as universities and our stakeholders, of course, industry, governments, a building that acts as an enabler of a lot of collaborative work with them, very necessary. Research, transference, trainee, etc. And the base of that building, I'm using the figure of the building, is confidence. Confidence. To be trustworthy as organization. We as universities have the capacity and the responsibility of being a place and a space of encounter, of meeting between different actors of society, of the community, where the self-interest is not above the common interest of the community. And maybe someone is wondering how could we generate this confident climate. And my response, my experience, is that the way is being very respectful to the engagement of the university in the search of the truth, in the looking for the truth, of course, within our capacity and the human limitation, the science limitation. More compromise with this search, more the confidence towards society we could generate. According to Edelman Trust Barometer, in 2023, 77% of the population of Argentina, my country, trust in the researchers. The highest level of confidence between different options. According to other survey, at the beginning of 2023, 75% of population of my country trust in universities. Meanwhile, the same number distrust of the justice system, for example. 74% distrust of labor unions, and so on. So, these are good news for my country universities. I imagine that probably these numbers may be repeat in other countries or other regions or continents. But it's a responsibility too for us as universities. A great opportunity to have strong bonds with the industry and the community. I'm finishing this first idea. As we maintain this high confidence level, we are the best option for society, understood as a whole, governments, industry, social organizations, labor unions, NGOs. We're the best option to be the place, the right place to discuss, to study, and to look for solutions for the most complex and challenging problems. And of course, I'm convinced that is the way to accelerate the achievement of the SDG. These goals are so complex and has such difficult level that is required a multidisciplinary approach that the multi-sectorial interaction could contribute in a unique way, as had just you said, PATNAIK, a few minutes later.
Thank you so much, Professor Rodriguez. And now, taking cue from what each one of you have mentioned, while certainly, we all look forward to having a meaningful collaboration between a university and the stakeholders at large, because as I had mentioned at the very outset, university forms a part of the larger ecosystem, and as responsible university professors and members of a community, we need to contribute to knowledge creation, knowledge construction, and knowledge dissemination, so that the larger community impact stays positive and continues to be positive. While this is a cherished goal and a good ideal, but now in the current times, all of us at some time or the other do face some challenges pertaining to funding and fundraising, so on and so forth. So, in this given context, I would like to hear from Professor Peñalver and then Professor Rodriguez, and then I will go to Professor Edward Peck about, when we have a push for corporate funding, which is now being increasingly viewed as a viable option in universities to meet challenges of declining public financing. Do you see this particularly impacting academic freedom in more ways than when universities receive funds from the government? Over to you, Professor Peñalver.
Potentially, I think anytime you're receiving funding externally, there are impacts on academic freedom or threats to academic freedom, and universities just need to be very clear about what their commitments are and what funders' interests can and can't do to impinge on academic freedom. So, I think there are, the choice of subject matter, study is an appropriate donor limitation, right? The donors can say, okay, we'll give you money to do a study on X or Y, and not, have the institution has to make a decision in accepting that funding, whether that's something that it wants to engage in. But the freedom, once that kind of subject matter is defined, the freedom to carry out that research and to follow it where it leads, I think is a non-negotiable commitment that universities need to protect. And so, but I think that's true whether the funding's coming from industry or whether the funding's coming from government or whether the funding's coming from a private individual. There's always that risk of interference, and universities need to just be very clear at the outset that they won't allow that, right? So, as a fundraiser, I've had many conversations with donors who often want to be, they want to have some influence on certainly on the content of the research, right, on the subject matter of the research, and just helping them understand the boundaries is an important part of raising funds for a university. But I don't know that it's, there obviously the profit motive is present in the context of industry in ways that it's not necessarily with an individual or with government, but those other entities have other interests other than profits that might lead them to want to interfere with the content of research or with the way that research is carried out. So, it's the challenges are maybe different a little bit in terms of the motives for potential infringements on academic freedom, but I don't know that they're different in kind from the threats that would occur with any other source of funding.
What do you think, in your opinion, Professor Rodriguez? Because even Austral University, considering that it's also a private university, what are your views in terms of your experiences and the challenges that you have facing in terms of the engagement with the industry and the potential need for corporate funding and the impact on academic freedom in particular?
I agree with what have just said Eduardo. I don't feel that there is any difference between, in terms of freedom, okay, between or among the public financial support or private one. For us is the same. Clearly, of course, the private sector clearly has a more focused interest in research, in the content of the research. So maybe there will be more restrictions when the private sector is who is funding the research than the public one. But what I don't feel any difference is about the freedom related with the outcome of the research. And I think that the most important thing is to be free in terms of which is the outcome of research. So in those terms, I don't feel any difference. Of course, I insist on the idea that clearly the private sector is interested in studying very specific subjects, topics, and it is very well understood because they are who are funding those investigations.
Thank you so much. I'm going to go to Professor Edward Peck and ask him a question which is connected to what we have been just discussing with both Professor Peñalver and Professor Rodriguez. But I'm just going to sort of alter it a bit. When we are talking about partnerships and funding and particularly, bringing industry or corporations into the picture here, certainly it is connected to even the donor-driven initiatives as well. And we all need to raise these funds based on a certain proposal, and the proposal that pushes for some tangible outcomes as well in terms of what that research proposal is going to achieve. So while quantification is one of the core objectives, how do you think that funding research vis-a-vis social goals can be sort of made more effective? Because when we talk about social goals, everything is not quantifiable or everything is not tangible, right? So how we can have an outcome-based initiative and yet have the confidence to be sort of driven from the funders' point of view and bring in donations so that research can happen and innovations can also take place for addressing social challenges. So as a public university, what has been your experience in this context, Professor Edward Peck?
Yeah, it's a really good question. As a public university, of course, by definition, the majority of our money comes through public sources. And about 80% of our income comes from undergraduate or postgraduate fees, majority of which are funded by a loan taken out through the government-backed student loan company. So there's an important starting point, I think, for a public university like ours. And for me, the challenge is about the balance of funding you have between the public, the private, and the philanthropic. I think the public and the philanthropic can be fairly easily aligned, actually, because public research funding is often looking to generate knowledge in a particular area of interest to government. And the challenge you face as a university is how do you produce knowledge which answers the questions that the policymakers have and rather just answer questions that you might have. And too often, I think researchers around areas of interest to government tell them what they found rather than what it is that would connect with what it is that the policymakers need to know to start to shape change. So again, it's about meeting your partners with their priorities. It's not about changing your conclusions, it's about making them relevant and accessible, I think, to busy policymakers. Donors, from my point of view, tend to donate their money in a particular area, as Professor Peñalver said, and then leave us to it. They have no particular axe to grind, except to say they hope a particular area, cancer research, will make some breakthroughs that will generate outcomes that are better in the future than perhaps their relatives experienced in the past. And I see that as relatively straightforward. As was said, the commercial private funding is more problematic in two ways, in my view. Professor Peñalver, Professor Rodriguez talked about the issue to do with the freedom of speech. For me, it's also about intellectual property. And often the challenge we face is what is going to happen if we do find something that is groundbreaking, innovative, and new? And how's the intellectual property then split between the two organisations who are involved? And of course, there may be many organisations involved. And that for me is the bigger challenge. On the commercial advantage one, and how you do or don't publish things that the commercial advantage of the company, it seems to me you have to have a clear view about that, as Professor Peñalver says, but recognise that every case will be different and there will be some coming and going and toing and throwing before you get to a place where everyone's happy. The intellectual property one, of course, is much more of a future risk, because you don't know at the start how lucrative or not this particular innovation or patent might turn out to be. So for me, they're very different things to think about. I would not want to see too much my university's funding being relied upon for commercial activity, simply because that would start to drive particular questions, which may not be the ones that are central, I think, the interests of my colleagues or indeed of our communities.
Thank you so much, Professor Edward Peck. So we have been talking about the civil society at large and the corporations as part of the society, but till now we could not bring the role of the state or the government into our conversations. But given the challenges and opportunities and stemming from the experiences each one of us have, both as individuals and as institutional representatives, I would like to hear from each one of you in terms of your views and your sort of a framework for action in terms of what policies are required from the government that can really facilitate and enhance the larger industry academia collaboration. I will go back to BETH to initiate a conversation on this because you might have had some experiences while driving the initiatives of the ACU and as part of your many outreach activities working with universities and governments around. And then again, we'll have a round of reflections from the university leaders present here on this particular viewpoint. Over to you, Beth.
Thank you. And yes, this is indeed one of the priority areas that we work on with Commonwealth governments in our role as the voice of higher education in that forum. And in fact, it was the theme of a piece of benchmarking study that we did through what we call ACU measures, whereby our member universities can benchmark on research activities and funding across the Commonwealth. And that issue of industry-university partnerships came through really strongly, both as, I think has been mentioned, a real source of funding. I think it was the third largest source of funding behind kind of grants and project-based, and that also kind of those public-private and industry partnerships and commercialization of research were really mechanisms for enabling our members to deliver impactful research. But we also found in that survey that translation of research into commercial or sustainable outputs does remain a real challenge. And it's an area that, whether that's due to challenges around pace, agility, as we've sort of heard, different missions, different ideas of intellectual property and how that's conceived, there are still barriers to overcome. So we at the ACU really do take these issues forward on behalf of our members to the Commonwealth governments in those forums. But we're also looking at where we can work with other organisations to explore this challenge. So we work with our partners at the Commonwealth Enterprise and Investment Council, who kind of act as the voice of industry within the Commonwealth. And we bring together industry leaders and academic leaders to explore these challenges, to see, well, where can we develop policy and practice initiatives that can overcome them. And I think there's 4 areas that have come out in conversations with our members, where we could see action being taken either at a governmental level or in terms of interventions from partners in the ecosystem, as we've explored. So firstly, I think there's an opportunity to have kind of a mission-oriented approach from government. So where our government strategies align to the interests nationally and internationally, and setting out those spending and programmatic priorities in a very mission-based way across the entire ecosystem. And I think, we've seen that in the UK government, have done that in particular. Secondly, financially, so where can we see greater private sector financial incentives, encouraging businesses to invest in R&D, but also looking at how investment, and we really advocate for that investment directly in university research funding as a attractor and enabler for businesses themselves. So that co-benefit that you see, and getting governments to recognise that. Thirdly, we look at where there are shared services. So where can we find things such as technology transfer offices shared amongst universities? We as the ACU look at how we can broker connections between our members, regionally or internationally, to support, as well as on things such as services and training, and helping our members through that knowledge exchange to improve around commercialization and share learning. And finally, having a real coordinated cross-cutting approach around skills. And that's a very kind of business-led, but also coordinated approach to developing and upskilling using higher education. And I think just finally to finish, I think on this, an example where we've seen this really holistic approach in practice is the government of Kenya have just launched a 10-year plan where they're looking at really supporting innovation and entrepreneurship, not only supporting kind of through skills and higher education, the cultivation of future entrepreneurs, but also where there's support then for enterprises to grow, and they're working very closely at that relationship between business and higher education.
Thank you so much for those thoughts. Let me go back to Professor PEñALVER and seek his views on this particular question.
Well, I agree with the examples that Beth gave. I would add, I'll just add a couple of really important ways the government can be helpful, especially from the perspective of a private university. Obviously the government has a very important agenda setting function and can deploy its resources to encourage collaboration between higher education and industry actors, and can providing seed money and things like that to just sort of foster these kinds of collaborative initiatives. But one of the things that we struggle with in our relationship with government is making sure that we have access on equal terms to those initiatives as compared to public institutions, and it's just a challenge that we have to constantly engage with government to remind them the value of private higher education. This is especially true in the state of Washington, where Seattle's located, but I think it's generally true in places where there's a really robust public sector in higher education, as there is throughout the Western United States, especially, to remind them of the value of a plurality of actors and the value that we can bring. We've found that in our engagement with industry really appreciates some of the differences between private and public higher education. The most important one for us being that, we're a little smaller than the big state university up the road. We're about 7,000 students at Seattle University compared to close to 50,000 students at the University of Washington. And it just means that, at every level we can move more quickly and more nimbly. And so we have a great partnership with T-Mobile, which is a cellular communications company around innovation and wireless technology. And they've said to us that the thing that they really appreciate about working with us is just how quickly we can move. And that's something that I think, as a private institution, we bring to the conversation. So the government, I think the role, all the ways that it fosters innovation and research and collaboration are really important, but it's equally important that it do so in ways that are accessible to private institutions of higher learning as well.
Thank you so much. Since we are running short of time, what I'm going to do is, although the momentum is quite building up now, but we need to end this program, this particular panel, in the next few minutes. Since we are talking about the corporate funding and the role of governments, certainly it is connected to even the resilience by the institutions. I do have a question which I have received from the viewers, and this is quite pertinent to what we are discussing. And I would like to invite Professor PEñALVER and BETH to respond to this particular question. And it goes like this. So, given the focus of corporations on profits, can private funding lead to any kind of serious sustainable development related research?
Beth, why don't you go first? I feel like I've
Just to repeat the question, you said, given the focus of corporations, what was it? Sorry, is there serious development research? Can it lead to serious outcomes?
I think the question was, if I understood the question, it's, does the presence of the profit motive mean that there won't really be genuine progress towards sustainability coming out of collaborations between universities and industry? I mean, I guess I'll go back to where I started, that we're not going to, one of the ways that we're going to make progress towards sustainability, it's not the only way, but one important way we're going to make progress towards sustainability is through technological innovation, right? I think of electric cars, right, as an important part of how we're moving towards a more sustainable future. Battery technology, that's part of that. There are a lot of very important sustainable technologies that will come out of private research at corporations that will make some people a lot of money and still move us towards a sustainable future. And the alignment of that motive, right, the profit motive with sustainability is something that is not automatic. And I think we need to be thoughtful about how policy can help to achieve that alignment. But the idea that because there's a profit motive or a profit being made that it is taking us in a different direction, I think is not a fair assumption.
Thank you so much for those thoughts. So while we are having a conversation in this particular context of what benefits universities can reap per se by virtue of their collaborations, I would also like to alter it a bit to have quick views from each one of you, BETH, Professor Edward PECK, Professor PEñALVER, and Professor Rodriguez. What benefits can corporations derive from such collaborations on the contrary? Starting with you, Professor Rodriguez.
I think that a first benefit is that type of collaboration helps universities to be very close to the market, very close to the needs of the society. So it's a way of helping researchers not to think only in terms of papers, but in terms of bringing solutions, real solutions, to the needs of society. It's a way to promote and to foster this approach of university, of the researchers, of the laboratories, to the society, who is our first responsibility.
Thank you so much. Over to you, Professor PEñALVER.
I would second what Professor Rodriguez said. I would add, when I talk to leaders in industry, In Seattle, what they say, you know, their greatest challenge is finding talent. And so I think involvement with universities is, you know, to the extent that it strengthens that alignment that Professor Rodriguez was talking about, it helps make sure that the people coming out of universities are being taught the skills and the subject matter that is relevant and important to industry leaders, and you know, that knowledge about how to achieve that alignment really resides with industry. But also, you know, the actual involvement, right? The involvement of students, especially in research, maybe primes them toward staying in the area and working for those companies that they were exposed to as students, and that can help with that talent recruitment challenge. So there are a number of benefits for companies in being engaged with universities in their regions.
Thank you so much, Professor Peñalver. Over to you, Beth Button, followed by Professor Edward Peck. Some views on this particular aspect.
Thank you. I think to not cover what's been mentioned, just to bring a different angle to it, I think one of the things that the ACU we look at in particular is the idea of kind of equitable and sustainable partnerships, and we've done a lot of work in looking not only at how universities can develop equitable partnerships amongst themselves, but particularly in the partnerships they broker with community and with industry and other stakeholders. And I think one of the benefits for industry, if they look at the longer term partnerships that they can engage with universities, is I think research shows that longer term partnerships tend to be more equitable and sustainable. So, you know, how can and in what way can industry partner in a way through their relationships with universities in which will enable them to derive longer term or more equitable benefit for the kind of communities they serve and their own work as well.
Thank you, Beth. You will have the last word, Professor Edward Peck.
That's very kind of you. So I have no wish to add about the issues to do with innovation and skills. I think that's absolutely what they benefit from. In my experience, actually, going to Beth's point about government strategy, is that governments find it hard to sustain a strategy over a prolonged period of time. And that what universities tend to do is pick off the opportunities as they arise, knowing the agenda will probably change in 3 or 4 years' time to something different. That's how government and parties work. And for me, the best thing the UK government does is the Higher Education Innovation Fund, where they give money to universities on a formula basis to give us the capacity to go and talk to these companies, to build these relationships without any particular prior agenda about what the outcome would be. And often the biggest challenge universities have with businesses is businesses don't know how to access the university, how to make the most of the innovation and the skills that we have, and how therefore to make the most impact on their particular sector. So for us, that unearmarked money you can spend in any way you want at university is the most effective thing that the government does for us around business relationships. I think that's preferable to these grand strategies, which often don't last very long and may not necessarily be exactly what it is the companies in your particular area have as their priorities or indeed their interests. So I think there's a balance between government having a strategy and government just letting local people have the resource, the time to do what it is they think is best in their local circumstance.
Thank you so much for those insightful thoughts and perspectives shared by each one of you. Throughout our discussion, we had the opportunity to explore the dynamic landscape of multi-stakeholder collaborations, recognizing both the opportunities as well as the challenges that are inherent in forging partnerships between academia, industry, government, and most importantly, community stakeholders, like, for instance, from harnessing the power of technology and innovation to addressing systemic barriers and inequalities. Each one of you have offered valuable insights into the complexities of collaborative partnerships for sustainable development. Therefore, as we reflect on our deliberations, it is clear that the future of higher education lies in embracing and continuing with a culture of robust collaboration, innovation, and with social responsibility. And by working together across sectors and disciplines, I'm sure we can unlock new pathways for positive change, driving meaningful impact and advancing the global agenda for social justice and sustainable development. I'm indeed so very grateful to each one of you, Professor Edward Peck, Professor Eduardo Penalver, Beth Button, and Professor Rodriguez for your time and for your participation and for your cooperation, collaboration, and friendship with the OP Jindal Global University, and for participating in the 4th edition of the World University Summit. And our discussions today, they would only serve as a catalyst for action, inspiring us to redouble our efforts in building an inclusive, equitable partnerships that would empower communities, protect our planet, and create a better future for generations to come. On this particular note, I thank each one of you once again, and let us continue to work together. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor PATNAIK. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening.
Thank you.